All right, so today I'm talking about something similar but a little different. So it's another essay. And I just called it Consciousness of Unconscious Consciousness. So I'm going to post my Emerson talk probably today or whatever, and you'll see where this came from. But it came from Emerson, and Van Leer reads Emerson. I mean, I read the review of Van Leer's book. I didn't read much of the book, but epistemically, which is wrong. You can't read Emerson epistemically. That doesn't make any sense. You just can't do it. And the review makes that clear. But you have to read him ontologically, and this is the same argument that I'm making to the Emerson Society, which is that Emerson should be read ontologically. He's not talking about a theory. He's talking about God. And so that's what this is about. Consciousness of unconscious consciousness. So the unconscious is often viewed as an outdated metapsychological construct. So metapsychology is just the idea of what are the things in the theory. For example, the superego is a metapsychological construct, insofar as it's an object of the theory. Okay, so the unconscious is often viewed as an outdated metapsychological construct. A lot of people say you don't have to worry about the unconscious. The clearest, I think, example of this is the idea of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is related to cognition. And cognition would be probably those things that are conscious. It's not clear to me that you can have a cognition which is an unconscious cognition. It would certainly be interesting, but I don't get the sense that, to the extent that cognitive behavioral therapies come from behaviorism, my suggestion would be that it's unlikely that you can have a metapsychological construct in your cognitive behavioral theory because of the definition of cognitive behavioral. I suppose you could, when you start to get into things like unconscious classification exercises, then you would probably want to say something about the ways in which your cognitions are influenced unconsciously. But let me just start there. So the unconscious, refers to all those processes that occur outside of conscious awareness, right? Conscious awareness are those psychological events of which a person could report being aware. Unconscious processes are those processes that operate outside of this awareness. For example, there exist apparently cognitive tasks, such as classification tasks, that appear to be done outside of conscious awareness. A person is able to correctly classify an object prior to knowing the correct classification consciously. So one of the examples that I have is, like when I read my email, I'll know if I'm going to delete something before I know what it is. So I'll notice that something is like an advertisement. Before I say to myself, this is an advertisement, you should delete it, I'm already going to click delete on the advertisement without knowing why. So the same is true for classifications of beauty. Beauty is an unconscious classification task of which one can become at least partially aware. One can describe the reasons one thinks they find something beautiful. Moral classification tasks are likely at least partially unconscious, so though they are amenable to significant conscious and cultural modifications. So one is also unconscious of consciousness. This is where it starts to get weird. Consciousness invades consciousness. Therefore, consciousness must be distinguished from itself. The traditional distinction between consciousness and itself is that between the logical form, the transcendental or conditions of consciousness, and substantive or experiential consciousness. The former, namely the logical form of consciousness or the conditions of consciousness or the transcendental conditions of consciousness, the former is the unconscious ground or possibility of the latter. So one is a condition. There is a logical condition of the substantive experience of being conscious. The former is the unconscious ground of possibility of the latter, and on the traditional view, Kant, the former cannot come into experience of the latter, since it is condition. It is its condition. I think that's backwards. The latter cannot come into conscious awareness of the former, right? So you can't be conscious of the conditions of your consciousness, because that's what conditions are. That's the argument from Kant. This form of distinction supposes, however, that the condition of consciousness is only the condition of the consciousness of which we're suggesting it's a condition, right? So I'm sitting here, I'm conscious, and the idea is I can't be conscious of the precondition of my consciousness because the precondition is in a sort of unilateral relationship with the latter. Okay, put differently, the condition of consciousness cannot, on this form of the distinction, be the condition of another consciousness of which it is in. Put differently, the condition of consciousness cannot, on this form of the distinction, be the condition of another consciousness of which it is an indirect rather than a direct condition. Bear with me. Here, indirect condition is understood as the condition of a consciousness which is not the consciousness of which it is supposed the condition cannot be experienced. This is very confusing. Okay, so the idea is simply I can't be aware of the condition of my consciousness, but my suggestion is that was what we might call a direct awareness of the condition of consciousness. An indirect awareness of the conditions of consciousness would be my awareness of the conditions of another person's consciousness. Right? So in the same way that there is a material space-time, my suggestion is going to be that consciousness is something similar. Consciousness is a precondition of consciousness, that's what I'm saying. And if you're telling me, Kant, that I can't be aware of the conditions of my own consciousness, then what if I suggest to you that I can be aware of the conditions of your consciousness? Right, so I'm aware of your consciousness, but I'm perceiving the condition of your consciousness. That's the second suggestion. This form of the distinction, therefore, fails to consider that the condition of consciousness can be experienced insofar as it is a condition of a consciousness which is not the consciousness having the experience of the condition. Okay, so what if my consciousness could observe the condition of consciousness that is not its condition, but is the condition of a different consciousness? The condition of consciousness may therefore be experienced, this is my conclusion, insofar as it is experienced as the condition of a consciousness which is not the consciousness which experiences the condition of consciousness. That's what I just said. The condition of consciousness is therefore objective. It is available to intersubjective observation. So the invasion of the condition of consciousness into conscious awareness is variously understood as both religious ecstasy and psychopathology. So as religious ecstasy, it is the encounter with the Holy Spirit. On the way to pathology, so in between, it's an ambivalent daemon. As psychopathology, it is a panic attack or a schizophrenic break. So those are all the three things that refer to the same thing. Whatever the experiential tenor of those three, often conditioned by the conscious disposition towards this aspect of the unconscious, which is a modification of the unconscious disposition towards this aspect of the unconscious, the invasion of unconscious conditions of consciousness have a purpose. It is the invasion of the properties of the condition of consciousness into consciousness. Consciousness is the middle ground between the res extensa and the res cognitans, the former being characterized by limitation and the latter by boundlessness. So all I'm suggesting here is that there are two types of things. One is a material thing and one is a immaterial thing. The property, I'm not doing anything, this is just Descartes. The former extended things are characterized by limitation, and the latter is characterized by lack of limitation. Therefore, the invasion of the condition of consciousness into consciousness as divine, demonic, or panic is the invasion of infinitude into finitude. So it's consciousness it's the condition of consciousness coming into experiential or limited consciousness. It is an attempt to widen consciousness. The widening of consciousness is often experienced by consciousness as a threat. Even in the religious context, the experience is terrifying. All right. The invasion of the condition of consciousness into consciousness is often understood as supernatural, likely because of its property as infinite, but it is a natural process insofar as it serves a causal and adaptive purpose. The adaptive purpose of the invasion of the condition of consciousness into consciousness is to increase the capacity of consciousness, and to bring into this larger consciousness that which occasions the invasion. Often a panic attack is occasioned by an overwhelming experience. The experience is overwhelming to consciousness in consciousness's present capacity. The invasion of the condition of consciousness into consciousness is intended to increase the capacity of consciousness so that it can contain the novelty which overwhelmed consciousness in its prior capacity. It is the psychological equivalent to an increase in heart rate in response to a physically demanding task. The pathological experience of the invasion of the condition of consciousness into consciousness is predicated on the constriction of consciousness against the invasion. This constriction causes panic though the constriction vis-a-vis the outer world can be an adaptive advantage against exploitation. On the other extreme, the religious attitude is often characterized by an unquestioning acceptance and receptivity, which allows the expansion to take place. However, it has the side effect vis-a-vis the outer world of gullibility and anger. Overconstriction against the invasion also leads to projection of that which consciousness is supposed to expand to contain within itself, while an overly receptive attitude leads to the introjection of that which consciousness is supposed to seek in the world. The precise circumstance of the thought that accompanies the panic must be studied to understand that which is needed of introjection. The method is symbolic and relies on the principle of synchronicity. That is, that the panic-inducing outer event has a symbolic relationship to the inner event, which is the hindrance to consciousness expansion. All right, I'll leave it there. All right, so the idea is Kant says you can't observe the condition of consciousness. My suggestion is you can. The reason that I think you can is because even if I didn't perceive the condition of my own consciousness, which you're saying is in principle impossible, although at the same time, the synthetic a priori is also just made up, then what I'm going to suggest to you is that while I can't observe the condition of my own consciousness, then perhaps I can observe the condition of your consciousness, or consciousness as such, which is the ground of all consciousness. The idea would be, I think most simply, if you and I are both conscious, then the condition, which is the condition of my consciousness, is the condition of your consciousness. And if I can't perceive the condition of my consciousness because I'm conscious via that condition, then perhaps the condition of consciousness exists in some intersubjective field through which we can both observe it together. I don't know. I mean, this is just... Kant sucks. That's all I'm going to say. That's really it. I don't think I got anything else on this. The idea, I mean, if you listen to the last one where I was talking about trauma production versus psychological versus psychedelic rebirth symbolism, the suggestion here is the psychologist, right? So in the last video, I talked about how the psychological is deficient. It's I forgot what I said, but you can go back and listen to it. But I'm retaining in this not the I'm still retaining the method, I think. Maybe that would be a criticism of this, is that I'm retaining the method of the psychological, which is the subjective attitude. So the subjective attitude might still be present in what I've just suggested to you. Although, I mean, I think this is also, you can notice that, I think. But I think that, I mean, when I was trying to understand what I should call this, I also try to think of it as the definition of transpersonal psychology. Because it's not personal psychology. I'm suggesting the observation of the condition of consciousness is not an observation of the condition of my consciousness, which would be the subjective theory. That's what Jung does with it. He says it's his. He calls it the synoptidos. And that means that he perceived the condition of his own consciousness. That's the limitation of the psychological method. Make sure I'm even recording this. Cool. Okay, so for Jung, it was a condition of his own consciousness. What I'm suggesting, and strangely, I mean, maybe I'm reading him wrong, which is possible, because I guess I'm finding another case of confusion for me with respect to his text, which may or may not be in me. It could be in him, but he's kind of smart. So the Bayesian prior on this is that he's right and I'm wrong, just because of reasons, but they could be bad. All right, so Jung, what was I even talking about? Jung's subjective method. I could be wrong, and the reason. Let me give a reason why I think it's possible that I'm wrong about the subjective method vis-a-vis the condition of consciousness. I think the reason I'm wrong is because I have a reason to suspect that I'm wrong about something else in Jung, and I will elaborate that now. If you read Collected Work 9.2, which is Aion, if you read the part about Christ, he talks about the insufficiency of the Christ symbol. And without going into like theology, I think we can bracket the theological question for the most part, because I think what he's doing is cultural criticism. And so when he says that the Christ symbol is limited, we have to contextualize that within Protestantism in the early 20th century, and all of the other ways to contextualize that. But if you read 9.1, or not 9.1, what is the Christ Lapis parallel in? Is that in 14? I'm going to look it up. Please hold. I'll look up 14. No, it's not in 14, dude. Is it in... Oh, it's in Psychology and Alchemy. Oh, I'm dumb. It's in Psychology and Alchemy. Yeah, okay. All right. So, okay. So you've got 9.2. You've got Collected Work 9.2. I'm going to check the publication dates. '68. Yeah, oh, 59. So 9.2 is 59. Psychology and Alchemy. Hold on. It's 53. I mean, I don't know if it really matters. Okay, sorry, I haven't gotten to the actual point. Okay, so in 9.2, he says Christ is limited. The symbol of Christ is limited as a means of cultural criticism. In 12, he says there's a parallel between the symbol of Christ and the alchemical lapis. So the lapis is the stone. I don't know what it is. Nobody knows what it is. It's all made up. Because for reasons that don't matter. Although I could link videos that would tell you the reasons. Oh, actually, if you want to know the reasons, read the Schreber case. So Freud comments on the Schreber case, and Jung does too. Who wouldn't? And then there's the guy who gave himself LSD 75 times. Go look at that guy. And you'll know why the alchemists made stuff up. All right. Which could be an interesting commentary on the use of psychedelics as a means of... it's like a symbol system for covering the realities. All right. Okay. So 9.2, Christ is a insufficient symbol for the self because it fails to contain the Antichrist. This is Jung's whole hobby horse, right? Well, he says that the Roman Catholic tradition, I'm not actually sure what it would be in Orthodox. The Roman Catholic tradition says that evil is the absence of good. Jung is a psychological phenomenologist in the sense that he's more concerned with psychological processes than, say, Husserl, but he still brackets, he basically says if it appears into my consciousness, it's real. And that's what he says about evil, right? So for evil can't be the absence of good because it's experienced substantively in psychological life, and therefore it's not an absence, it's a presence of something. Okay, so that's what he's saying with I forgot how I got here. That's what he's saying with the Christ is insufficient because good is the presence of Christ and bad is the absence of Christ, but there's the Antichrist, and so self, which contains good and evil as a nature of its limitation, as a function of its limitation, the self can't be, well, this is what he says at least, the self contains good and evil as the origin of both, you might think. Okay. That's what he says in 9.2. But in 12, Psychology and Alchemy, he says that the lapis, which is the goal of the alchemical work, is it's a construct that covers the same content or whatever. It's the same thing as Christ. And so, if you do the transitive property, if the lapis is the goal of alchemical work, and Christ is identical with the lapis, or in parallel to it at least, I think he wants to say something like then Christ actually is a symbol of the highest realization. So I think I don't know if I'm misreading. I don't know if the cultural criticism interpretation is right, and he still thinks that Christ is a symbol of the highest self. Right? So, okay, we're going to leave it there. And let's try to get back to where we were, because I don't remember where we were. The subjective method. Okay, so that's all to say that I may be misreading Jung, and therefore I may be misreading Jung's subjective method and synoptidos as spirit as transcendental condition of consciousness. As a personal synoptidos, personal spirit, personal transcendental condition of consciousness. In which case, right, because what I'm saying here is that the conditions of consciousness are intrasubjectively available, or I can perceive a condition of consciousness even if it's not the condition of my consciousness. It's consciousness. It's a condition of the possibility of another consciousness. That, I think, is transpersonal, right? So we've got all this conflicting data with Jung, because the transpersonal stuff came out of Jung. Although I'm going to do I'm going to search the Jung's collected works for. I want to see if he ever says transpersonal. Does anybody know if he ever said transpersonal? Or did that come later? So I have all Jung's collected works, digital format, and I can search them via a script that I wrote that searches all of the text of Jung's collected works for keywords. So let's do that now.